Jozi.js May. It feels surreal. It feels like it's been the longest year ever. And I distinctly recall opening us up in January with, oopsie, PowerPoint being weird. With this slide, right? About how exciting and amazing and futuristic 2020 was going to be. Little did we know what it would become. So yes, it's been a hell of a ride, but we're all in this together. So carrying on from there, we have a code of conduct, which basically boils down to we want you to be nice, be respectful and constructive, work together, and don't be spammy. And I did the slides last minute, so this one was supposed to be before the code of conduct. But we can't wait to have everybody in the same room again, having a few drinks and talking about JavaScript and really sharing experiences and learning. The people that are helping us keep the show together is the amazing Council of Wizards, which are around here and might chime in a little bit later on. So if you ever want to express any concerns, any code of conduct violations, just reach out to somebody. Those are the people. Please feel free to talk to any of us and let us know exactly how you feel. We'd also like to thank our sponsors. So firstly, our usual venue sponsor in BBD, and then secondly, what is now our broadcast sponsor in Immersive. Thank you very much for all of the support over the years. And thank you very much to Microsoft and the Azure Tech communities for supporting the Jozi.js meetup group. We really do appreciate it. So I'm not going to keep you for too much longer. I just want to point out two things. And firstly, if you have any inclination to submit a talk whatsoever, we would love to have you, and we'll help you. And we're a very, very friendly environment. So please, the link on the left is to submit a talk. You can always also go to our meetup page to check it out. And if you want to see any of our past recorded talks, there's the link or QR code on the right. And we'll put these in the comments as we go. And then finally, I'm going to be manning the questions and answers and presenting those questions to our speakers. So if you do have any questions, please go to that Slido link, register now, ask your questions, and then I'll read it to the presenters at the end of their sections. Cool. So with no further ado, I'm going to stop talking and hand over to Rory.
Okay, let's just share my screen. Share screen, you guys can see it. And from the beginning, from the top. And I'm going to use my nice little Lenovo pen to actually annotate. Let me just move this down there. Talking Rory. Hi, everyone. My name is Rory Preddy, and I've got a nice little pen which helps with my ADHD. I work for Microsoft. We're a small little startup out of Seattle. I don't know if you've heard about us, and we make productivity tools. One of them being the Immersive Reader Cognitive Services. And what I'm going to speak on today is how to incorporate it with a JavaScript application. And today actually is the Global Accessibility Awareness Day, or GAAD, which is a fundamental part of the accessibility calendar. And yeah, look it up. There's a lot of people speaking and there's a lot of information around that. So please follow me on Twitter and let's start. You can also access all the slides, the samples, everything by this QR code. What are we going to talk about today? First, I'm going to go through very briefly Accessibility 101. What is accessibility? Then I'm going to go and show you the Immersive Reader. And then I'm going to attempt to live code Cognitive Services API via an Active Directory and also a Node Express application. So yeah, wish me luck. I do have a backup. So let's just see if I manage to get that. And then we're going to deploy this also via Visual Studio Code to our Azure App Service. So first, let's start with accessibility. And I think a big misconception about accessibility is that accessibility means disability. but disability doesn't actually exist. So let's cross that out. Because disability only exists when you have a mismatched human interaction. And basically that means that you were not designed and the designer didn't actually cater for you. When you go to a doctor and you say to him, hey, I'm not feeling too well, he doesn't say to you, oh, I think you've got disability. The only time that you feel disabled is when you have a mismatched human interaction. So with accessibility, what you code is that you actually focus on how to design your systems for everyone, not only the small percentage of people who are average abilities. The WCAG, which is the Web Center of Accessibility Guidelines, has 4 main accessibility principles, which we'll go through to give you a better understanding of accessibility. The first one is perceivable. Can you see it? And this caters for people who are visually impaired, who are colorblind, or who are normally not able to access it through sight. Second, we have operable. Can you use it? This caters for people who have mobility issues, people who have paraplegia, or who have neurological or an inability to actually use your application or your website. The third one is understandable. Can you understand it? And this is a very new addition to accessibility. Can you understand it? Because this also includes, from last year, ADHD and autism spectrum, and a lot of the other ones that don't necessarily were, that weren't catered for previously. And the final one is robust. It won't break future technologies. The principle behind accessibility is if it's accessible now and there's a new technology that comes out, you must make sure that it's still accessible. So that's really the simple idea behind accessibility, and why it's such a really hot topic right now is because the American federal government and the EU made it mandatory for all publicly civil sites to be accessible. So you're getting a lot more corporations saying that we will not be able to publish sites or applications without making our sites accessible. In Microsoft and Microsoft Azure, we have certain services that cater for accessibility. And I first need to give a background with Azure AI. Now we have your normal bot service, which is accelerated development for conversational AI. Then we also have the Azure machine learning, caters for TensorFlow, your Python notebooks. And then we have something called cognitive services. Now, cognitive services are pre-baked AI models that cater for the majority of what you're trying to achieve with your API-based driven AI tooling. You can see here we have a spider, and that model there that detects the spider has already been pre-learned on spiders. And with our cognitive services, we actually have quite a few of them. And we break them up into vision, speech, language, decision, and search. Yes, we still have Bing. You can just Bing it. That's still a thing. And the one that I want to show you and talk to you today is one under language called Immersive Reader. In 2015, we have an ability hack every year. And in 2015, the winners of the ability hack actually created something called Immersive Reader. And they said, this is great, but what happens if we could take all of these language and speech and possibly the decision and some of the vision and add it into a service that made reading and writing and listening accessible in a web application or a application that is driven on your desktop. And what was born was the Immersive Reader. So what does it look like? Most of you have actually used it or have access to it because the Immersive Reader is baked into all of your Office tools. How many people use Office in the world? Over 1 billion. So this is Microsoft Teams, and you can see there, you can just click on the eclipse and go into Immersive Reader, and suddenly another window opens up with all these different options. So you can go into Word, Excel, OneNote, PowerPoint, Teams, all of them have Immersive And what that Immersive Reader does, it connects in the back end to your Azure Cognitive Services API and does exactly what we're going to do. So all we're really doing is we're mimicking the Office environment to give you that same kind of accessible look and feel as Office. So what can it do? So one is that you've got the ability to show language. So you can see here we've got nouns and adjectives. I went to private school, so I think there's another kind of noun. There's like a pronoun also somewhere there. Yeah, and you can break it up into different language constructs. You can also translate it into 60+ different languages. So you can see here, this is into Spanish. You have pronunciation, so you can mouse over it and it'll connect to the actual text-to-speech services and give you and read to you the actual word. You can break it up into syllables. And then finally, you also have pictures, which is pretty important. So you can mouse over that, you can get a little pictogram there of exactly what you're trying to see. The pricing right now on Azure, because it's linked into Office, we don't actually charge for it. It's $0 per 1,000 transactions because it is in preview. So in preview, and there's no SLA link to that. So if it does have an issue, you don't really have the option to say, please fix though. But right now you can actually use it. It is in preview and it doesn't really cost. So how do you create it? I've got a nice little screenshot here. You can go into your Azure portal and Home, Cognitive Services, Marketplace, Immersive Reader. You can see their preview. And then you just create it. You can link to your Visual Studio subscription. I get $150 a month with Visual Enterprise, $50 for professional. You got your location, US East. You got your pricing tier. Remember, it's free. And then you got your resource group. And then you can just create it. And it'll create something like that, which will give you your application. And how do you authorize it? So you go into your Active Directory application, and I'm simplifying a little bit here, and you create an Active Directory application. And what we call this on Azure is B2C, so business to consumer. Because what we're trying to do is we're trying to create a tokenized mechanism to connect to your cognitive services that we created in step 1. So you've created and here you can see your application. You create then your IAM with your group. So over here, you can see here, I've given it a cognitive services role. And then your client application then will call for the Azure Active Directory in your application. It'll get a token, and then you'll send through the token to your Immersive Reader application, and you'll get your Immersive Reader application, all of the results back. Now, Immersive Reader only works with Active Directory authentication for the time being. Some of the other cognitive services, you can actually use OAuth or other services, but you have to actually use Active Directory, Azure Active Directory for Immersive Reader. Once you have that token, you can actually start calling it. And I ran a little application insights here. So this actually does a scan, and application insights is your telemetry on your application. And I wanted to see exactly how long it took. And I had the US East here, and I connected to the token, which is actually connects to login.windows.net over HTTP. Takes about 200 milliseconds, but that's also because I'm doing a round trip through to South Africa. And then you get your token, and you can actually call it. And you call it also with your keys. So this here is my cognitive services that we created in step 1, and I get my key, which I'm not going to really show you. And then you can an endpoint there that you call it with, and you can actually get your Immersive Reader application. But keep calm, it's demo time. I'm going to show you how to do this from start. What we're going to do here is we're going to create a Node.js application, and we're going to connect it to a pre-existing cognitive services application that I showed you how to create via the portal, because that takes a little bit longer, and I don't really want to waste your ginger and pineapple beer time. So we've created the cognitive services. We're going to create a Node.js web app with Express. I am on the belief that Express is still a thing. We're going to set up authentication, and we set it up, and we're going to create our tokenized calls. We're going to add some sample content. We're going to build and run the app. We're going to launch the Immersive Reader in JavaScript. And then finally, we're going to attempt to host it on an Azure App Service. I'm going to do the Azure App Service from scratch. And this is going to dovetail nicely into Gergana's talk, which she's going to show you how to build a YAML pipeline to host application services. Okay, so let's do our demo. I'm going to minimize here. If you do hear dogs or children, they might be mine. Okay, so let's actually first create our application. So we're going to do it in a new application. Hold on. And we're going to go to temp2. And we're going to go, okay, cool. Let us, and we have previously done npm install express, and I am typing here, not actually running any macros, generator/g. So I've done this before, npm install express generator, and this will install globally the express generator that will allow you to actually create your base skeleton application. But I've done that before, so I'm going to just use express, and we're going to go --view. I'm going to generate and equals to pug, which apparently stands for something. And we're going to call this here quick start -node.js. So I've got my express, and that's going to create in the temp2 and another folder there called quick start. That was pretty quick, eh? That's Node for you. Maybe even as fast as Dino, I'm not too sure. So if we go into quick start there, we've got our application there. And what we want to do is we want to build it, and we want to modify it a little bit with our Immersive Reader. So first we want to go yarn, and that will build our packages. And then we want to add two new packages there. We want to add request and .env. So request will actually add your API capabilities, and .env will allow us to actually add properties in the base root structure. So yarn add request, and then yarn add .env. So before we start, I want to copy, without anyone looking, I want to copy the keys that I created in my first cognitive services into my root folder. So I've got my env file there. I'm not going to show you what it looks like, but I'm going to go into my temp2 folder that we just created. And now I've got my env, and I can pull it in there. So after that, I want to actually open this up into Visual Studio Code. And this will start up, and I've got all my necessary plugins. And you can see that there's my env file, my app.json, and the roots and views. So we need to actually tell it to read into the env file. So we want to actually go into our sample here, and we want to just copy here, and you can see this is the bit that I want there, require.env.config, and that will load in your environment variables. So yeah, so that doesn't have it there. And now we can actually load in the environment variables, and the environment variable contains all your secret keys and everything to connect to your cognitive services and your Active Directory. After that, I want to actually go in and create my API. Remember, we did the request, and in my API, I've got the index.js, which will actually go and create my API. So I've got my index.js, and I want to just kind of use under the roots there for the base structure. You can see it's pretty simple there. Let's go through exactly what I'm going to do here. So first of all, I go in and I say, okay, get the home page. And I have a little API called get token and subdomain. And in the get token and subdomain, I actually go into, remember with that application insights, login.windows.net and say, I need to get my client credentials. I send it my keys, and it returns back a token for me to call my immersive reader. That's all we really want to do. And it's linked through to the API get token and subdomain. We still have now a need to go into our pages. We want to modify the error.pug to actually call the get token and subdomain. So I've got my little file here, and we'll go through that. So in my index.pug, see, it's pretty simple here. And the first thing that you'll see here is that I import, let me just make that a little bit bigger. I import here the Immersive Reader SDK JavaScript file here, so I can actually call my Immersive Reader jQuery. And then I have some sample content here that the Immersive Reader is going to read. And I get my token. So I get my token in async, and it will return my token. And then finally, I launch the Immersive Reader. So get token and subdomain async. And this here will actually call the Immersive Reader JavaScript file and launch it in async. That's as simple as you need to actually do to actually get it working, is make sure everything's saved, save all. And I should be able to here now, if I followed all the steps, so I did the app.js, index.js, and index.pug, I should be able to just run it locally now. npm start. And if I hit localhost, it should actually create my index. And if I hit localhost 3000, I should have an immersive reader. So localhost 3000 should open it up about my immersive reader. And you see here, I've got my little immersive reader. Here's all the text that we have here and all the other languages. And I can hit immersive reader, and it will connect to my authentication. And you've got your immersive reader. It's as simple as that. An immersive reader, if I click play.
Immersive Reader is a tool that implements proven techniques to
So you can change the voice actually there, female, male, voice speed. You can go in and you can change the text size, the font, the themes. You can show the syllables, the nouns, the verbs, the adjectives. And then you can actually make the reading a little bit better. You can do the line focus, the picture dictionary, so you can actually say reading, and then you can read each individual word. The line focus is very nice for ADHD. And you can also translate to another language. Should we try Afrikaans? Yeah, let's try Afrikaans by word. And let's go back there. I don't know if it's going to actually work.
reading comprehension.
Yeah, nice. I think Spanish is a little bit easier. But you can actually change the languages. Try Spanish. Spanish Latin America. Apparently there's many Spanishes. Spanish Spain. No, not Mexico. That's not Spain. I think I have to actually refresh. Let's reader. And then we'll go back here. Choose language. Spanish. Spain.
Immersive Reader.
Okay, well, you get the point. It actually will translate it there into Spanish. So that's really what you need to do now. The fun part. Now we've got it in Visual Studio. Let's deploy this from scratch into an application service. Still have some time, but 10 minutes, that should be enough. Now I've got the Visual Studio application service, the Azure plugin there, and I'm going to log in. So this is all from scratch. I'm going to log into my tenant, my Visual Studio Visual Studio Enterprise tenant, and then I'm going to create an application extension. Wow. Okay. Let's try that. Wow. Okay. Of course, this is a demo, so of course it has to kind of like bomb out. Let's just try that. Let's just close this quickly. Let's try that again. Let's try code dot. I mean, it is written in Electron, and it's probably, consuming more electricity than ESCOM right now. Okay, so let's go there. Azure. We're going to connect to an app service. Now, you can also connect to functions and storage accounts. And with Microsoft Build today, it was announced that you do get another service here, which has a plugin called Static Websites, which you can connect to websites that run single-page applications. So this is taking its time. Okay, well, I can just show you on the portal then. So on the portal, this is my Azure portal. And you create a resource here. We're going to create a resource. We're going to create a web app. We're going to go to web app. We're going to create a new resource group here. We can call this Immersive Reader RPZA2. You're going to choose code and a runtime stack. You're going to go Node, and we're going to go 3.1 LTS. We're going to use Linux containers. We're going to keep it into Central US. We're going to keep the actual SKU as.
Rory, that's .NET. You chose .NET.
Oh, Jerry, you are a godsend. Yeah, okay, Node, LTS, and then you can change the SKU size there. So we don't want that because that's a bit big. We actually want the free tier. Now with Linux on Node, you can actually get a free tier, and it's free as in free beer. Okay, we can do that another time. Let's see if this came back. Oh, it did come back. So now we can actually do it through here. And I'm going to just circumvent it. So once you create that, I've already got one pre-created on your Visual Studio account. So I've already created it there. You can just right click and you can go deploy to web app. And it will say, wow, okay, cool. What folder do you want? And we want to just use the root folder. So in our quick start temp 2 there, we've got our quick start. Would you like to update your workspace with your deployment preference? Yes. Are you sure you want to run? Yes. And it will deploy it and then open it up. If everything works well, it will actually deploy it. And then it will actually give you the option to actually open it up straight out of the browser. So one is that you create your app service and then you can actually deploy it. So let's just, in summary, I've got 2 more minutes. One is you're going to create your cognitive services in your Azure portal. You're going to create your Active Directory user. It's pretty simple to create that Active Directory user. Then you're going to create your quick start in Express. You're going to run and build your quick start to talk to your tokenized service and your Immersive Reader application. And then finally, you're going to use, if you want to run it in Azure, you're going to use Visual Studio here, or you can use the portal, and you're going to deploy it to the Immersive Reader application service. And once that happens there, you're going to get your application service here. We'll see it. Your Immersive Reader application service here. This is one I created previously. And you can hit it on the URL there, running on Node. And you're going to get your Immersive Reader. Now, this is actually connecting via our tokenized URL there. So it should work exactly as it did before. So Immersive Reader, and it's the exact same application that we had there.
Immersive Reader is a tool that implements.
1 more minute. I just want to finish off my presentation. And I've got a nice little video that sums up exactly why you should use it.
The fact that over the summer, that a child can go from basically nothing to having the world at their fingertips and being able to read and being willing to try, it's more than a miracle. I think it's more than anybody can expect. Even in kindergarten, Ajay was incredibly bright, but he couldn't read. The difficulty reading continued to 2nd grade. Shortly after Anjou was diagnosed with dyslexia, a friend of mine said she saw something online about a tool from Microsoft for kids with dyslexia. I made an appointment at our local Microsoft store. We went in, they downloaded learning tools, asked Anjou to sit down, and my son read. It was amazing. Anjou, in that moment, conquered this fear and realized that he could access something that had been inaccessible to him. I saw my little boy read and knew that here was an answer, that here was something that could change his life. Microsoft Learning Tools has been a miracle in our lives. He could get everything in the same font. He was able to lengthen his spaces between words, and that was amazing and so simple. Anjou's been happier, more confident. He was living his life where the written word was an enemy, and now it's a thing to be conquered.
So in conclusion, we went through a very basic introduction to accessibility and the 4 principles. We showed you how to incorporate and what Immersive Reader can bring to your web application. And then finally, also we connected to a Cognitive Services API and showed you that not only can you use the Immersive Reader, but the same process can actually be used for all of those other 30 different Cognitive Services APIs incorporating into your application. For more information, for the slides, for the examples, for all of the information that I've published today, you can click on that QR code, or you can actually go to aka.ms/quickstart-node.js, and everything is prepared for you. And then you can follow me on Twitter also. Thanks, everyone.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Rory. That was such a cool presentation. So there are a whole bunch of questions. People are very interested in knowing your or reaping your insights. And the first question that they have is, can you share your ginger and pineapple beer recipe with us? You can tell this is South Africa.
Wow. Okay. So Rory's rule number 1, never do something that might get you killed. So, and I'm 40-year-old, and I know that ginger and pineapple beer is way above my ability, and it's one of the things I've really steered clear of. That and large dogs, no, both of those, no.
Okay, cool. Next question. At what point does the cognitive services start charging you, and what restrictions apply?
Yes, so each cognitive services is charged differently. So if we go into the pricing for Azure, so remember this is in preview, so they're not actually charging you. So we can go yeah, I have to share my screen, sorry. Let me share my screen quickly for you. Share screen, share. Okay, cool. And if you go into the cognitive services pricing, I see I even had it here. You can actually get cognitive services pricing all in one. You can choose the region that you want. So US East, currency rand. You can go into vision, language, and search. So if you want to go to language, we can go to, okay, product, language understanding, Lewis, feature, text requests, or speech requests. And you'll see there that it's priced per either 1,000 transactions, or you can even get 152 Rand per million characters. The search is priced differently. And then we've also got the vision one. So for computer vision, 0 to 1 million transactions, 15 Rand per 1,000 transactions. And this is also as a free tier. So usually the first million is free, and then it has tranches up there and it changes. So you need to actually go into the individual cognitive services and you'll get the pricing, and you also have a free tier.
I was wondering this next question myself. What is a PUG file?
That's a good question. I'm assuming that a PUG file stands for the Express template. So this is an Express generator. So we used NPM generators, and we use the quick start for Express. So if I use Google, I might find out, but it's basically your template. So it excludes any of the standard markup that you would have on your HTML. Mark, could you tell me the real name for it?
Maybe later. So the next question is, does Electron use more electricity than Kubernetes? And I think we could just say no, nothing uses more electricity than Kubernetes.
Friends don't let friends use Kubernetes. I think the industry, if you're an expert, great, use Kubernetes. But our preference at Microsoft is OpenShift. So if you know what you're doing and you really want to go down that rabbit hole, use Kubernetes. But we've just relaunched general availability of OpenShift on Azure, and it has built-in pipelines, it has built-in
okay, enough sales.
Yeah, it's much easier.
You've reached your sales quota for the day. Okay. Is this available in the South Africa Azure zone? And does it support all of the South African languages?
So good question. No, so right now it is not. That's why I deployed it to US East. And South African languages are very difficult because South African languages have a lot of dialects. So you'll notice that they're down in that language list was Afrikaans. But one of the things that the CSIR, that the Center for Research that the government, the core NGO that government funds, is trying to get Zulu as incorporated into a lot of those services. Zulu has over 200 individual dialects, and the population for each of those dialects is not as large enough to actually warrant each dialect being there. So it's an ongoing kind of fight to try and get the CSIR, government, and also the cloud providers to try and cater for these different languages.
Okay. Next question. Does the Immersive Reader support dyslexic fonts?
It does have multiple different types of fonts. So
I saw Comic Sans, yeah.
Yeah. So let's go into. I'm sharing my screen. Let's just show you all the different fonts. And I've still got my application there. I'm going to minimize, and that's my Immersive Reader here. And I've got my. I'm clicking on my little button. It's just that's local.
I'm going to ask you the next question, so long, because it's also related. Can you provide a custom font?
So no. So if you remember, the Immersive Reader here is basically a pre-baked model. So if you wanted to do that, then you'd use the speech text services in the other cognitive services. So this is kind of like an opinionated view of what a majority of our customers would want to use. So the font choices there, Calibri, Sitka, and Comic Sans. So maybe out of preview, there will be additional fonts.
Okay, because I mean, this is just a JavaScript API in the browser, right? So yeah, there's no reason why you shouldn't be able to provide a custom CSS and custom fonts.
Yeah, no, you can. Yes, sorry, you can provide custom CSS. You can actually do that.
Okay, cool. And then the last question we have is how could we convince business that this is something that needs to be tested? And how do you encourage developers to think about people who need this?
Stick and carrot. So one of the talks that I did, accessibility for all, the same question came up. And what I show is that there's two ways to approach this. One is like what happened with GDPR, where everyone was supposed to actually take care of people's data. And then the GDPR EU came in there, and suddenly now the whole web is just pop-ups everywhere, constantly saying, we respect your data. The same thing is happening with accessibility. The American federal government, the EU Parliamentary Committee, is making accessibility a mandatory requirement. So that is the stick. And the Canadian government has made it that if it's a public-facing civil website, i.e. a government website, and you are not accessible, you'll get fined $100,000 per day. And that'll come down to us. You saw how long it took for GDPR, but it will come down to us now. So the carrot part is that you get access to more people who can use your tools. What we showed you with Immersive Reader, and that video was actually showing you for children learning. But what we're not showing you is the silver generation, the generation that is their eyesight is actually fading, and you can actually cater for the elderly. So once you actually code for one accessibility requirement, you extend it to many, allowing you to be able to incorporate into the more than 1 billion people out there in the ecosystem that have accessibility requirements.
Okay, cool, awesome. Thank you very much, Rory. That was amazing. And now we're going to move on to the next talk of the evening. Thank you. Thank you. Round of applause. And the next talk of the evening is going to be Jerry.
Hello. Let me just share my screen. Make sure I share the right thing. Okay, move this thing. This Zoom talking thing is hard. Okay, I can still see everybody. And I'm sharing my screen. Great. Let's start then. Oh, hey, everybody. Thank you all for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed Rory's talk. And he talked about a few of the things I'm going to talk about, but I hope that you don't get too bored. Anyway, I'm going to be talking about Azure as well and getting your JavaScript app onto Azure. That did not work. All right, but before that, let me introduce myself. My name is Gergana, but I usually go by Jerry because that's a little bit easier to pronounce. And my Twitter handle and website are on the screen over there if you want to get a hold of me. I work for a company called Cora. I'm a co-organizer of Jozi.js, and I'm also a Microsoft MVP. I was given the MVP award because of my contributions to IoT and the South African dev community. And for those of you who know me, you know that usually I talk. Sorry, my phone's ringing. I talk a lot about robots. That's because that's where everything started, with me programming a robot with JavaScript, a Star Wars droid. And there has been other things such as wine buttons and lightsabers, garage door motors, and other many robots and things that I have built. Unfortunately, this talk does not involve any things. There are no robots. This may, in fact, be the most serious talk I have ever done. But don't worry, there's still going to be JavaScript. Mike is busy laughing at me. As JavaScript developers, we all come to a point in time where we want to build our own websites because it's kind of cool, right? We get to try out the things that we don't normally get to do. And seriously, and I'm sorry, I'm just going to turn my phone off because it's going to keep ringing. All right, there we go. As JavaScript developers, we all get to a point where we want to build our own website because we want to try out things that we don't normally get to do in our day-to-day. And that's really cool and it's fun. But then we get to a point where we need to get our website somewhere public so other people can see it. And that's usually okay if we're doing something like a static website or a single page app. All of the different cloud providers have many tutorials on these things. And let's not simplify it. It's not simple, but it is possible. There's a way to do it. But what if we get to a website where we have some logic or data that we need to use or something that we need to do with some sort of server? Then it becomes more difficult. Then we start hearing that famous buzzword, DevOps. And DevOps, and another word which I just learned recently from Rory, DevSecOps, is one of the biggest buzzwords of our time. And what does it even mean, right? And this is the definition from Wikipedia. I'll give you a second to read it. Now, reading that's the formal definition from Wikipedia, I feel like this. Wait, what? What's going on? Like, I still don't understand what you mean by DevOps, right? And that's a little bit of a problem. But what I've found is that DevOps means different things to different people. So for people like you who wants to just deploy your simple website, it might not actually be necessary to understand what DevOps really means. So today we're going to simplify DevOps. We're going to make it easy by using Azure as our cloud provider to host our app, Azure Pipelines to build everything, and GitHub to hold our code. Let's get started with the first demo. Now, this first demo is going to do what Rory was attempting to do earlier. So we're going to create a new resource, and it's going to be a web app. Click create. Let's hope this is more successful than Rory's attempt. Okay, we're going to call this Jozi.js because this is going to be the Jozi.js website. No, wait, that's the resource group. Resource group, Jozi.js. We're going to be deploying code. Our runtime stack is going to be Node 12, latest version that is available on Azure. And we're going to be deploying to South Africa because we want our website to be a little bit faster. We're going to create a new app service called Jozi.js demo. And of course, because we're cheap, we're going to choose the cheapest available one. Why is the free one not available here, Rory? You can answer that later. Review and create. Okay, we can skip all the other steps. The other steps aren't important. We can just review that everything here looks okay and hit the create button. Now, this is going to take a little while, so we're going to go back to the slides in the meantime. Now, while that web app is busy creating, that's where we're going to deploy our website to. We're going to move on to how we're actually going to build and deploy websites. Now, this part is where a lot of different opinions come in and clash, because building continuous integration and continuous development pipelines has been a highly contested point over the years. Many people have many different opinions, and usually, again, with this kind of thing, you have to find what works for your team. So one thing I found that's worked for my teams previously is that we have a way that gives the developers ownership of what is being deployed. In other words, when you deploy code, you know that that code has the potential to get into production and therefore break things. So you must be responsible for that code. And a way to do that is by ensuring there's tests. So whether that be unit tests or integration tests or whatever that may be in your code, and not just tests for code coverage, but also tests that actually test the right things. Then having a pull request model usually works quite well. If you have a second pair of eyes to look at your code to make sure that you haven't made any silly mistakes or anything like that, that usually helps. And because none of us are perfect, there's always a point in time when something goes terribly wrong. It's good to have a rollback strategy just in case. So we're going to use Azure Pipelines to build our code and release it to production. Azure Pipelines is a cloud service provided by Azure, and it allows us to do these things. It's free to a point. Again, you'll have to ask Rory up to what point it's free. And we start by creating an azure.yaml file. So let's go do that. If you go to dev.azure.com and sign in with a Microsoft account, you'll be able to create a new project. Let's call our project Jozi.js demo and make it a public link. Now in this project, this is Azure DevOps. You can do a lot of other things besides the things we're going to be doing. You can have things like boards, so like where you can control what your team's doing and things like that. You can host your own repos inside here as well. The pipelines is where we're going to get to, but you can do things like test plans, etc. But we're going to be hosting our code in GitHub because most developers' code is already in GitHub. So let's hit create pipeline, and it will ask us where it is. We'll say GitHub. Usually when it's the first time you do this, you have to go through a whole process where you have to actually log into GitHub and give it access to a specific demo, to a specific repo. I'm pretty sure I chose the correct one. There is a bunch of different templates configured here. So if you're using something specific like Node and Vue or Node and React, then you can use one of these templates. Now, I just have a plain Node app, but I want to show you how to do it from scratch. So I'm going to click on this start pipeline over here. And I'm going to delete all of the comments. Now, the first thing is our trigger. This trigger is when this pipeline is going to run. So when we commit into our master branch on this GitHub repo that we're connected to, we're going to run this pipeline. Here, you can also make it run on specific pull requests or for specific releases or whatever it may be. The next thing is the pull. So where is this code going to run? So where's this pipeline going to run? In our case, if you remember correctly, we chose Ubuntu when we created our web app. So we need to make sure that our pipeline runs in the same thing. And then we have the steps. There are two types of steps. First type of step is a task. And our first task is going to be a built-in task. The @ at the back here specifies which version of this task we want to use. Usually, you should try using the latest version. Our task needs to have some inputs, and the inputs for our Node tool are what version of Node we want to install. And we want to install version 12. And it's also good to give all of your steps a display name. That way, when your pipeline is running, you would know exactly what is actually happening. The other type of task we have is a script task. A script task is any script that you would run in your command line. So we're going to run npm install. And let's give this a display name as well. That's going to be install dependencies. We're going to add another script. And this script is going to be npm test, so we can run all of our npm. So we can run all of our unit tests. Then, once our unit tests have run successfully, we know we can start creating something that we can deploy. So what we're going to do is use another built-in task that is copy files. And that's going to take as inputs a source folder where to copy from. I'm just going to copy this from over here. Contents, what to copy. We want to copy absolutely everything. And the target folder, where to copy to. And we're going to copy to the build artifact staging directory and call our folder app. Let's give this task a display name. Call it files. And last task will be to publish those files. So we're going to use the publish artifacts. The inputs here will be the path to publish, which will be this same path over here. And the name of the artifact. Let's just call it app. And then display name for this one. Publish. All right. That's it. That's all we have to do. Now we can just click save and run. You see, when we hit save and run, it wants to know whether it can commit this Azure Pipelines file into our Git directory. What it does is it actually has access to GitHub, so it can commit it. So if we go while this is creating over here and say git pull, we should get that file. And our job has been queued. So our job should start running soon, starting, there we go. And it will start by checking out. So you see, this is a task that we didn't actually define, but because we've linked it to our GitHub repo, it knows that it needs to check out the master branch of that GitHub repo. It will install the dependencies, which may take forever because we know npm downloads the entire internet, and our job has failed. Our unit tests. Oh no. If we click on here, we can see exactly what has happened. Well, we expect false to be truthy. That must be why it's failing. So let's go check our unit tests. If we take a look at our package.json, we have a test command that's busy running, and it's just using jest to run all of the files inside the test folder. There's only one file and only one test. I know this isn't a very good test. I just put it in here for the purposes of showing you how to run your tests. So let's fix our test. Fixed our test. Let's go into here and push it. We're going to commit, fixed test, oops, and push. Once this is pushed into our GitHub repo, in our pipelines, we'll get a new job that will start, and it will start building, and it should go through all of the steps successfully this time. Let's just refresh to make sure that it has started. Okay, it's busy starting. So I'm going to leave this to run because it takes a little bit of time, and go back to the slides. Now, the tasks I showed you were quite simple. There wasn't a lot of stuff that we did, but there's a lot more that you could do with this Azure pipeline. For example, if you wanted to run on different installations, you would use something called a strategy. And you would name all of the different things that you want to run on. And then by using variables, you can run on all three of those. So you can run on Mac, you can run on Windows, whatever you may want to run on. Another really cool thing is something called stages. You can use stages to separate each part of your pipeline. So have a build and a deploy section. So the build section does what we just did, whereas the deploy depends on the build section succeeding. So only if the build section succeeds, then do we actually deploy this thing to production. And we can have things like strategies. So only run a certain thing once, or a certain set of steps once. There are a lot of different built-in tasks. So we saw some of the utility tasks like copying files and publishing, but there's also build tasks. So for the many different languages and platforms, there's a whole range of different build tasks you can use. There's also some tools and testing tasks. There's packaging and deploy tasks for, again, different platforms and deployments and all kinds of different things. You can also create your own tasks. I haven't attempted this yet, so I can't really tell you how easy or difficult it is, but it's an option if you can't find the things that you need. Then let's first, before we get to our last demo, check whether our pipeline is running. Okay, so it is on the publish step. This step takes a little bit of time because it has to publish all of the node modules we downloaded. And as we all know, npm downloads the entire internet. So for our third and final demo step, what we're going to do is release this pipeline to our app that we created at first. There are two ways to do this. The first way is by using those stages that I just showed you inside the same pipeline file, and it will build as in the same process. But because I've already shown you that, I want to show you a different way. Oops, don't look at that slide. All right, so the other way of doing this is by using the release pipeline. It's a little bit different. This one, you configure everything inside here, not inside YAML. You can still download the YAML file as well, but this YAML file does not get saved in your repo. It gets saved in this project inside Azure DevOps. So we're going to hit new pipeline over here. And it has a really nice UI, kind of easier to follow. There's a whole range, again, of different templates and things you can use to deploy this. We're going to do an Azure App Service deployment. We're going to call this deploy Jozi.js. And we're going to link it to an artifact. So what are we actually deploying? Well, we're deploying the result of this. It currently has no artifacts because the build hasn't finished yet, but that's okay. But I'm hoping that by the time we finish this, that the artifacts will be there. All right, so we've added the artifact. Everyone's laughing at me, you can't see them. And what we're doing right now is enabling continuous deployment trigger. This way, every time there is a new artifact that has been built by the build pipeline, this will trigger and release a new version. All right. Then we click on that over there. Now, you can see the different tasks. Here you can add multiple tasks, you can add multiple things that you want to do in this one job, but we're just going to do one thing, and that is deploy. We need to authorize with Visual Studio because otherwise anyone would be able to access my Visual Studio account, my Azure account. Hit next there and sign in. Once it's signed in successfully, it's going to authorize. Now, important thing we need to change in here is that this is a web app on Linux. If you remember, we did the whole change to Linux and Ubuntu, and cool, this is authorized. So our app service name should actually be there. It's the one we created earlier. It was called Jozi.js. And the startup command we're going to leave blank. I'm going to explain to you why we're leaving this blank in a moment. Let's go to our actual thing that we're running. So what we're doing is deploying to an Azure App Service. You can change this name to make more sense to you, but as we all know, naming things is hard. So everything else we leave as is, except for these last two bits. The runtime stack needs to be node 12 and what folder we're actually deploying. So if you remember when we created the app service, we said we were deploying code. So we are going to deploy the entire folder of code. Hit OK there, and we have that. Now, if we hit save, let's just check our run is finished. So we can save and we can create a release. And release 1 has been created. So this also takes a couple of minutes. So while it's busy deploying, I would like to show you some more of the code. So I've showed you the tests, but the other thing that I want to show you is these two commands. So if you remember, we left the start command blank because by default, the command that runs is npm start. So whatever goes into this command is the command that will run in production. So that's why I have a debug command over here. I can run this locally on a different port. You don't have to run it on a different port. I just like prefer doing it this way pretty much. The reason I've chosen port 8080 is because by default, that port is enabled on an Azure App Service. If you want to run on another port, then you have to change it inside your app service. So our app service is being created here. And what you have to do if you want to add another port is go to the configuration. And in here, add an app setting for whatever other port you want to run this on. So if you're running on port 8080, you don't need to do that, which is pretty cool. That's why I usually just set it to 8080, just makes my life easier. Cool. And then our actual app, I haven't shown you what that looks like. It's a very simple app. It's got Express. It's serving the public folder as static. And it has one endpoint which gets the wizards. And inside our public folder, we have an HTML file, an index file, which calls that wizards endpoint, some CSS, and a few images. If I show you what this looks like locally, I'll find my, let's run this locally so you can have a look. Zoom. Go to localhost 3000. This is what our website looks locally. Cool. All right. Let's see if this deployment is done. It is not done. Oh, well, that sucks. What we'll do in the meantime is I want to show you how easy it is to now make changes now that we have these pipelines in there. All we have to do is make a small change. Let's add a follow us on Twitter at Jozi.js. All right, and all we have to do here is if we stop this, we're going to say add, commit our change into GitHub, Twitter, and so that's still busy running. That's been pushed. So our pipeline here should start up a new one while our release is still deploying. Okay, then. Let's just have a look at what's actually happening. Usually when you click on it, it sometimes works faster. I mean, sometimes it's like watching paint dry, but in the meantime, can we answer some questions?
We certainly can. Well, I mean, I hope we can. Okay, never mind.
Okay, we can answer some questions. I'm going to let the website load so long. So the first time you go to your website from an app service, it actually takes a little bit of time to load. So we can watch it load while we answer some questions.
Okay. Can you edit the azure.yaml file in your own editor and push it to the repo instead?
Yes, you can. You can do that. So if I wanted to make changes, it's in here now. If I just wanted to make changes in here, that's also fine. As if I push it, it will apply those changes. So usually, yeah, a lot of the time, the first time you create your YAML file, the build doesn't actually work because something got mixed up along the way. So you end up editing it, and it's also easier to edit it in Visual Studio Code.
That leads us amazingly into our next question. Editing the YAML and getting the build working can take hours for some projects. Is there a tool chain for your dev machine for the trial and error?
Sure, I don't think so. I don't know, maybe Rory knows of one, but I don't actually know of one.
Okay.
My thing is usually push it to GitHub and wait.
I think that's everyone's thing, unfortunately. Rory, do you have magic answers?
Just repeat the question again.
Is there any way to test your YAML file locally before pushing?
So the actual worker, that runs locally, you can run it as an agent on your local PC. So it's theoretically, you could run the entire DevOps toolchain pipeline locally on your PC and have an agent running there. You would have to mimic the operating system and some of the environmental concerns, but yes, you could actually run it all locally. A lot of people are actually provisioning old servers to run their agent locally rather than actually run it in the cloud due to compliance issues or data sovereignty.
It's a good answer. Thank you, Rory.
Thanks, Rory.
Is there a straightforward way to version control your actual pipeline? So not the build part, but the release part, I presume? Because the build part is there, right?
So what's interesting is when you edit your release pipeline, it does ask you for commit messages as well. So it does keep versions, but it's all inside Azure DevOps. So it's just not inside your repo. So you can see like history and stuff. You can see when you've edited your pipelines and things like that.
Okay. And then finally, how does it compare to Jenkins or Circle CI?
I know what Jenkins is. I've never used it. I have no idea what Circle CI is. So I'm sorry, I can't answer that question.
Okay, cool. And that's it. So I don't think there are any more questions.
Cool. Well, yeah, thanks everybody. That's me. My change hasn't deployed yet. It will soon, I hope. There is some tricks you can do with those so that it doesn't have to copy all of your node modules onto your Azure repo. Or you could, I don't know, use Dino or something. But I think Dino is just node for people with OCD because it's just node in alphabetical order. So yeah.
Okay, so thank you very much, everybody. I think we're gonna finish up now. Please, if you are even vaguely interested in speaking, there is a speaker form, which I'll link, which is on our meetup page. I'm not gonna link it right now.
It's in the description of the...
and it's in the description of the live stream. So please submit. We'd love to hear you speak. And other than that, we'll see you next month. Good luck brewing your ginger beer or pineapple beer. I'm disappointed that Rory was tight-fisted with his recipe. So stay safe. Bye-bye, everybody.
Cheers.
Oh.